This is Real Estate Rookie Show number 71.
I really was just kind of living paycheck to paycheck because at the time when I had my police job, I wasn't making a whole lot of money. But then I left one police department for another, in which my income essentially doubled. And I was already used to living on a fixed salary. So from there, I just took that money and said, hey, I don't really need this money. Let me just pay off my condo. And I paid off that condo. The condo appreciated. It tripled in value over, until I bought that first townhouse. And I was able to get a home equity line of credit on that property and use it to invest and buy all the other properties that I have today.
My name is Ashley Kerr, and I am here with my co-host, Tony Robinson, and we just met in person for the first time.
Which is so crazy. And if you guys don't know, Ashley's actually like 6'4" in person. She just looks a little petite in camera.
I'm pretty sure most people listening have seen our Instagram content of us hanging out and our Instagram reels and our TikToks. I feel like probably 70% of the time we spent together was creating reels, Instagram reels, and TikToks.
Yeah, so big shout out to Nikki from the Bigger Pocket social media team, but also big shout out to my wife, Sarah, because she was like the standby creative director for a lot of that stuff. So you did a good job, wifey.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. We went to the Bigger Pockets headquarters. We got to meet a lot of the Bigger Pockets team. We got to meet Tyler Madden, who was a guest a couple weeks ago on the show. So we really had a nice time in Denver.
Yeah, and Ash and I had long, deep conversations about life as well, right? Getting to know each other. I know all of Ashley's like dark, deep secrets now. So if you guys want to know, just let me know. I'll sell it to TMZ, Ashley, maybe if I get a good enough deal.
Well, what's really funny is like when we were doing photos, they were taking pictures of us and doing headshots. And like the one time, I don't remember who was taking your picture, but they were like, oh, I think it was Zach, who's on the YouTube team for Bigger Pockets. And he's like, okay, now look into each other's eyes. And then when I count to 3, turn towards the camera. And I couldn't stare into his eyes without laughing. Like, this is an engagement photo shoot. And the whole time, Tony's wife is like, coaching us, like, okay, do this, do that. Okay, you guys look great. She was our hype girl.
Yeah, the whole weekend.
Okay, well, besides reminiscing on our trip.
Well, we got a good guest today.
Yeah, let's talk about our guest. So we have Martin Neal today on the show. Tony, tell us a little bit about Martin.
Yeah, so Martin, he's a police officer in Chicago, in the Chicago area, and he's got 16 units, and I think he got most of those in a span of like 3 years. And he shared a lot in this episode about how he's leveraging lines of credit to really build his portfolio, how he's buying from auctions, Section 8, just lots of really good strategies that I think people can use to invest in lower price points, because he's buying properties, kind of like what you're able to pick him up for him in the Buffalo area. And just ways to get started quickly, I think.
Martin really gives a lot of great advice. And of course, I, ask about what I'm personally interested in on every show. So we talk about auctions and basically tells you step by step what the process is like when using auction.com, which he has used in the Chicago market. But I mean, that's a nationwide website where you can get properties all over the U.S. Using that website. So make sure you guys listen to that part if you're interested in finding another deal source and want to learn more about the online auctions.
Martin, welcome to the podcast, brother. Super excited to have you on.
Thank you guys so very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. So you've got a really cool story. I was looking through the notes that the producers put together for us, so excited to dive in. But before we start talking about real estate investing, Martin, let's just hear about you. Who is Martin as a person, and what kind of initially piqued your interest in real estate investing?
So me personally, I went to school for law enforcement and justice administration, which is just a fancy way of saying I went to school to be a police officer. I've been a police officer for 12 years now. Love doing just spending time with the family and playing chess and a variety of other activities, physical activities, working out, things of that nature. During that 12 years being a police officer, I bought my first condo in 2011. And, kind of got bit by the real estate bug several years thereafter and just kind of hit the ground running recently.
Now, was that first condo an investment property, or was that just your primary residence?
It was my primary residence.
Got it. So what was it about that first condo purchase for your primary that made you think real estate investing might be the path you want to go down?
To be completely honest with you, my family really had to strong arm me into it because it's like, hey, real estate's on sale right now after the crash of, 2007, 2008. You're just seeing so much property just available. And it was like, hey, if you ever was going to buy, now's the time to buy, because it's not going to get too much cheaper than it is right now. So, some good convincing by them, I was able to finally say, all right, you know what, let me find my own spot and let me just get into it, and we'll go from there and see how
it turns out.
Exactly.
That's so cool, Martin, because I think what Ash and I usually hear on this podcast is the opposite, right? We're like, the family members are saying, no, don't buy, or the market the crash is coming, you should wait it out. So lucky for you that you had a family that kind of thought the opposite and said, okay, now it's the time for you to finally get started in investing. Did you have someone else in your family that was actively investing, or were they just kind of encouraging you to do so?
My father, he had been buying properties all when I was a younger child in my early teens. So he had been buying properties. He convinced my older brother to buy a property as well. So they had one or two properties, nothing crazy, nothing as many property as I have now. But, that's kind of where, they were with their real estate journey. They was like, hey, I'm going to buy a property here and we'll see how it goes. Or I'm just going to have an extra one to supplement my income. And we'll see how, it goes from there was always their mindset.
Martin, before we really dive into everything, can you just tell us what your portfolio looks like now?
Yeah, absolutely. So my portfolio consists of 11 properties totaling 16 doors. I have a 6-unit building. I have one condo, the original condo that I started with. I have 8 townhouses, and I have 1 house.
How long did it take you to accumulate that?
So I picked up the most of them, obviously with the exception of the condo. I picked up the vast majority of them in the last 3 years. So June of 2018 is when I got my first intentional investment property, what I like to call it. And from there, it's just one after another after another.
That's amazing growth. Congratulations. So, well, let's start there with, okay, you buy the first property. How did you scale? What was major factors you think that helped you scale so quickly?
I think just really defining my plan, what it was that I wanted to accomplish in real estate, and then just being brave enough to take the action and go for it. Because like I said, with the condo, I really became an accidental landlord with that particular property. And from there, I was able to see, because I wasn't spending any of the money that the tenant gave as rent. I just put it all in a bank account. And if a repair came up, I used that money and I just let it sit there. And, after seeing that money grow in the bank account, I was like, hey, it could be something to this. If I had 10 more of these properties, I wouldn't have to work at all.
So Martin, you mentioned being brave enough to get those next purchases. And I'm like, what a beautiful thing for you to say, or like, what a unique way to kind of phrase that, because a lot of times it's not a lack of capital or a lack of ability that holds people back. It's that fear or kind of that lack of bravery, like you said. What do you feel you did, Martin, to help like mentally prepare yourself to be courageous or brave enough to actually dive into buying, a 6-unit and all these townhouses and condos?
I think what helped for me best was me being fearful of being a landlord, hearing the horror stories about all the things that could go wrong, thinking about, what if a tenant calls in the middle of the night with a leaky toilet, or, what if they can't afford to pay, or what if I have to do an eviction, kind of being forced into, this situation that I didn't initially want to be in, and then realizing, things are not going to be as bad as you typically make them out to be in your head. Fears, false evidence appearing real, and that's a lot of what it really was. And I'm like, after I got that tenant in there, because I did fortunately screen properly with that particular tenant, I was like, hey, you know what? This is nearly not as bad as a lot of people try to make it out to be. So I'm like, you know what? You can do this. You have to believe in yourself. You have to have that mindset of feeding yourself positivity all the time. And when you feed yourself positivity and optimism, good things can happen. And that's really where it came from. It's like, hey, you know what? Don't believe in the naysayers. Feed yourself the right mindset, and you can accomplish the goals that you're trying to accomplish.
That's really great advice. I love that, because a lot of real estate is mindset, because there's going to be really hard days and there's going to be really great days, and you just have to keep riding the roller coaster. So Martin,
yes,
when someone accumulates so many properties, I think a common question right off the bat is how? Okay, how are you financing these properties?
So again, it comes back to that condo that I bought in 2011. Again, I bought that condo, just to go into the numbers a little bit, for $46,000. It was a 10% conventional loan. And so I put down the 10%, and my mortgage and principal, interest, tax, and insurance and homeowner association was about $850, roughly rounding up. And from there, I really was just kind of living paycheck to paycheck, because at the time when I had my police job, I wasn't making a whole lot of money. But then I left one police department for another, in which my income essentially doubled. And I was already used to living on a fixed salary. So from there, I just took that money and said, hey, I don't really need this money. Let me just pay off my condo. And I paid off that condo. The condo appreciated. It tripled in value over, until I bought that first townhouse. And I was able to get a home equity line of credit on that property and use it to invest and buy all the other properties that I have today.
So you didn't increase your lifestyle when your salary increased. Instead, you used that extra money and basically invested it, because you're saving yourself by paying off your mortgage early. So that's really awesome that you did that.
Thank you. Yes.
And then that has to be kind of a mindset shift too. So how old were you at that time?
At that time, 2011. Oh, sorry. I'm aging myself. I was 25.
Yeah, so 25.
24, 25.
Think about all the other things you could want. You have your first really high-paying job. You could have gone out and bought a brand new car. You could have went and bought a big house. So can you talk about the mindset of that? Of, were there books that you read, or was it your parents? What kind of gave you that money advice to do it that way?
For me personally, I grew up poor, to be completely honest with you. I grew up in some of the worst neighborhoods in Chicago. And I've always kind of had this mindset of watching people spend money that they couldn't afford to spend, and to live a lifestyle that they couldn't afford to live. And I remember being a child, and I owed my brother $5. And I finally got my allowance at $10, and then I had to give them back $5. And I was like, that's the worst feeling on the face of the earth. I think I got $10, and then I had to turn around and give somebody that I owed $5. And so I just always had this frugal mindset of, only spending what you actually have in your pocket. Don't borrow if you don't need to. And so that's really where my mindset came from, of, those around me who lived outside their means and they really couldn't afford it. And I was like, you know what, I'm learning lessons every day that, debt is a bad thing in certain regard.
Isn't it funny looking back on your childhood and realizing little tiny life events that occurred that actually you look back and wow, that set me on the path to this. That made up my mind about something. Yes. Or, even having a little lemonade stand or something, even if you learn one little thing about managing money, it's funny how much of an impact your childhood can have, and these little tiny events or occurrences that happen during it. Can really help you, be lessons along the way, and help you as an adult.
Absolutely. I definitely say those things throughout my life shaped me, especially, just every little thing that we do. I think there can be a lesson from it. Even me personally, when I played sports in high school, I really found myself realizing that, I'm playing a sport here, but I'm really learning a lot about life. I'm really learning a whole lot about life. These are life lessons. And that's one thing that I always tell my son religiously, is I'm like, hey, we may be playing a game here, but I want to let you know I'm really teaching you about life.
That I gotta jump in there too, right? So my son, he's playing basketball right now too, and we've been investing a lot of time and energy into his training and things like that. And that's literally, Martin, what I always tell him. I was like, the lessons that I'm teaching you right now, son, it's about basketball, but it's really about life, right? The lessons that you learn in sports and things like that, they translate to every other area of your life, man. So I love that you're kind of also preaching that as well. Sorry, not real estate related at all, but the mindset thing, I feel like.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's just mindset, because I feel like it's more mindset to be successful in real estate than it is more so the physical execution. Because I think mindset hold people back substantially from accomplishing the vast majority of the goals and dreams that they want out of life. And if you have the right mindset, I think you can really achieve anything.
And I think you're already kind of giving people, Martin, a playbook on how they start building that right mindset, right? First and foremost is having your personal finances in order. Ashley, you preach this all the time as well, right? Having a strong financial foundation to start from. Second is making sure that you're investing the right way. You bought something, you paid it off quickly, and then you were smart enough to say, let me get a line of credit to then use that to expand my portfolio. So there's a lot of, I think, actionable things. I'm just kind of recapping this for the listeners that you've already said, Martin. 10 minutes in, they can really change people's lives if they apply those two simple like theories that you've got.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny because I was sitting in the dentist chair yesterday, and again, me just feeling like I'm always the youngest guy in the room, realizing I'm no longer the youngest guy in the room. And the dentist is literally asking me like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm a police officer. I do real estate investing." And when I told her about real estate investing, her ears just poked up, and I literally felt like the whole time in the dentist chair, I'm just telling her about real estate and how she should invest her money and what passive income and freedom could do for you. And she was literally hanging on every word. And I had finally asked her, I was like, "How old are you?" She's like, "Oh, I'm 25." And I'm like, "Oh my God, I never felt so old in my life."
Yeah. Well, I love the advice that you're giving to people. And as someone who's like a podcast host in the real estate space, like I talk real estate to everybody all the time. My wife has to like nudge me to say like, can we just like not talk about real estate for a night?
Yeah.
But I want to go back, Martin, to your point about how you funded those next deals, right? Because you said that you paid off your first property. You then got a line of credit that you used to purchase your next property. So I guess give us a little bit more insight into how you were doing that. Were you then using that line of credit to pay cash? You'd fix them up and then pay off that line of credit with permanent financing, or what was your strategy that you actually used?
Yes, that's exactly what I did. I just used the BRRRR strategy literally for all of my properties with the exception of one, which is the 6 unit. I did the BRRRR strategy. So I would buy them for low. I would rehab for, on average, rehab budget about $25,000, and I would just rent it out, refi, and do it over and over again.
Now, were you managing these rehabs yourself, or were you hiring these out to people? How were you managing that aspect of it?
So my father, he became a big helping hand for me because he's a jack of all trades, and he agreed to essentially be my project manager on every project, and I paid him essentially a flat rate fee for managing the project. And he would handle the day-to-day operations, and the day-to-day operation would consist of, once we buy the property, we would put a lockbox on it. We would put the Simply Safe alarm on it, and we would have contractors come through, give us bids. He would either meet them in person, or if it was someone that we trusted and we couldn't meet them in person, then we would give them the lockbox code, tell them to go in, take a look, let us know what the numbers were. And from there, he would just manage the day-to-day activities and help him picking up supplies and making runs to the store for me and making sure that the contractors were doing what they're supposed to do and needed what they needed in terms of materials.
How did you guys track this? So your dad's doing part of the work. You're still kind of involved. Are you guys using any kind of tracking system or software, or just texting each other to communicate and to manage these contractors, just so you guys stay on the same page?
I literally was on the phone with him like every day, like literally text messages, phone calls, emails. Whenever it came to materials, I actually got a business credit card, and I put him as an authorized user. And so I trust my father like I trust no one else. So he was able to go to the stores, buy materials, and every day, as you like to say, Ashley, I was a freak in the spreadsheets documenting every single last thing, every dollar that we were spending, So I promise you, I just got all types of spreadsheets that track everything that we do.
Do you guys have any other processes, or what does it look like when you hire a contractor? Are you guys actually doing contracts with them? Is it more of a handshake? Is it word of mouth? What does that look like?
So typically we try to do actual physical contracts. Only a couple of times with contractors we've gotten really familiar with where we wouldn't do contracts, but for the most part, I go above and beyond and make sure, because there's nothing like an understanding. And I think the biggest breakdown typically occurs when you don't have something in writing. So I would literally go out and find a contract online. I would look at the Bigger Pockets files or the forms section, and I would go through there and look at other people's contract, and I'll see things that they might have had in theirs, and I'll incorporate it, or I'll just quite frankly plagiarize it and then add my own little things to it and say, all right, this is what I'm going to do for the painters, this is what I'm going to do for the electrician, yada yada yada.
That's why I love Bigger Pockets, and there's a million other resources too, just by Googling, that you can get and plagiarize other people's contracts. But that's why they put them out online, is so that other people can use them.
Yes.
So you don't have to recreate the wheel. And it's going to be very hard to find a contract that is specific and will work perfectly for you. There's going to have to be things that you change, but like you said, you just continue to add to it or change it and develop it, especially as your business grows. It's probably not gonna stay the same forever. You're gonna start to add more things to it or understand things that are more important. Like, especially if something goes wrong, okay, well, next time that's not going to happen. Let's add that into our contract. So, for anybody that is, starting to work with contractors, what would be some advice you can give them as to what they definitely need to put into their contract?
So first and foremost, when dealing with contractors, I specifically always like to put a timeline in there. It's like I'll ask them specifically, how much time is it going to take you to get this done? And then I always add an extra week on top of it. So let's say, for example, I'm dealing with the electrician. Electrician says, oh, it's going to take 2 weeks to do this job. All right, realistically, I'm thinking 3 weeks. All right, so we have an agreement that you're saying 2 weeks. I'm going to also put a clause in here that says if you're not done by the end of 2 weeks, we need to reconvene. We need to have a conversation, figure out how much longer it's going to take you. I'm going to, if you're not picking up materials, you don't get any money up front. It's just that simple. You don't need any money up front if you haven't done any work. It's one thing if you got to pick up materials. So I also have it in there where we structure how the payments are going to be paid out. So a payment system, if you finish 25%, you get this much. If you finish 50%, 75%, and upon completion, this is how much you get. And you really just want to make sure that if you are giving them money up front, because they do have to they have to pay for materials, that you always hold something back at the end to incentivize them to finish the job. Because once you give them all the money, they have no incentivization whatsoever to come back and finish up the work. And that's happened to me time and time again dealing with contractors.
How are you finding the good contractors, Martin? Like, if I'm a newbie investor, where should I be looking to find someone that I can trust to do the high quality work that you've had done?
To be completely honest with you, I really get a lot of good referrals from word of mouth. So other investors who say, "Oh, I've used this painter," or "I've used this electrician." I'm in Facebook groups where I can vet out some of the contractors, some of the painters, some of the handymen who's done jobs. So I can see some of their work. I could talk to some of their past clients because they'll say, hey, I just did this job for such and such. Or the client will go on there and say, I want to thank such and such so much for helping me do this. They did a great, fantastic job. And I can go back to them like, hey, tell me about how this contractor was on this job. Right? I'm thinking about hiring them for this. And so I think word of mouth really is the biggest way. But I think just being in the job, you have to understand that you're going to have to deal with some bad contractors. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But when you find the good ones, you do your best to hold on to them, treat them right.
Yeah. Now, trust is super important in your real estate investing career, right? Finding people that you trust. Now, obviously, you trust your dad, right? And you've done a lot of work with him. But a lot of people also, I think, are hesitant about partnering with family. But it seems like you found a way to really make it work. So, some people swear against partnerships and partnering with people that they know. Other people say that's the only way that I do business. What makes you feel that that's the right path for you?
I would agree that sometimes, it's hard to work with family. I could tell you about the arguments that I've had with my father. I could tell you about, partnering with my brothers and my sisters on deals. So it definitely can be a challenge. But no matter if you're working with a stranger or you're working with a friend, I think the one thing that we did is before we even agreed to go with the first project, we sat down and had multiple conversations like, hey, this is what the expectations are going to be going forward. This is going to be my role. This is going to be your role. If there's ever at some point in time where we miss something and we don't know who responsibility it is, then we're going to talk about it and figure out who responsibility it should be and define those roles.
Yeah, I love having that clarity up front because it removes any sense of ambiguity as you guys start to move through the process. Like, if you can say up front, you're going to do this job, here's what the compensation is for this job, I'm going to do this job, here's what my piece of the pie is for this job, then as you guys start kind of moving through the process, there's no surprise or things that could kind of cause some of that friction. Now, I guess my last question, Martin, is do you have any advice for people that any additional advice when it comes to specifically working with family? Like you said, kind of lay things out up front, but you said you've had some heated arguments with your dad as you've gone through that. Like, any other advice for people that might want to partner with family?
Yeah, like I said, I think specifically you have to be able to make it clear, no matter what happens with this investment, whether it works out or it doesn't work out, we're still going to be family. So I don't want this to terminate our relationship because this deal went south, or we didn't work well together. And so I think it's really just about that understanding, like, hey, we're going to be business partners. We're still family. We love you. We can have these conversations. If this deal doesn't work out, I don't want it to be any, sour or hurt feelings between us, So really just again, communication, like I said, it's nothing like an understanding. So you want to make sure that you over communicate, in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end, to make sure that you're on the same page, because that's the key. That's the key, communication.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Martin. And just the communication up front, like when you are, putting together your agreement of who's doing what, like look further down the road too. So like maybe one day someone doesn't want to manage that property. Well, what happens then? Okay, that was their responsibility. Now they just get out of it, and now everybody has to pay a property manager. So looking down the road too is really important. For example, my sister, she is house hacking and we own her house 50-50. Well, what happens when she moves out of the house? Like, do we split the cash flow 50-50? Is she going to use that cash flow towards her next property? And just all those little different things are so important with any partner, not just family, but you really want to protect those family relationships. It's a lot easier to do one deal with a random partner and say, okay, this didn't work out, and see you later.
And disappear. Yeah, right.
Going
in with the wind.
You have to sit across the Thanksgiving Day table with your family, but
exactly.
Yeah. So let's really dive into a deal. So I want to hear, the numbers, the purchase price, everything like that. So do you have a deal in mind that you wanted to talk to us about?
Yes, I can tell you about my best deal.
We'll just go through a couple quick questions, and then you can pretty much tell us the story about it. But when did you purchase this? What deal number was it?
So this was actually deal number 3 for me, and I did this deal with a partner.
And what was the purchase price?
The purchase price for this property was just under $30,000, so call it $29,500.
Looks like you're in an area like me where it's $20,000 to $50,000.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What market was this one in?
Again, this is in Chicago, specifically the south side of Chicago.
And what was the plan for this one? A flip, a BRRRR?
It was a BRRRR.
And what was the rehab cost on that?
So the rehab cost on this was originally $35,000, but with the holding costs and some other things that popped up, it wound up ballooning to a little bit over $37,000.
Well, I'll save the ARV and what it appraised for and all that for the end of your story. So why don't you go in and just start like how you found your partner, how you found the deal, how you guys financed it?
So yeah, I was really just, telling everyone that I could tell about what I was doing in real estate. And so this partner came along and they was like, hey, you know what? I see you doing some things in real estate. Would you mind partnering with me on the deal? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so they actually went and found the deal because I was telling them, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing townhouses. And it was like, hey, there's a townhouse that's on the MLS, but it's also on the auction. And I was like, all right, well, if you organize it and go to the auction, because I actually had to work this day, and make sure you don't pay more than $30,000 for it, we'll be able to make this work. Because one of the cool things about being able to see this property, even though it was on auction, we were able to get access to the inside of it. So we were able to see what type of condition it was in. So we knew, all right, this is pretty much our budget here. It's going to be a $35,000 rehab. And so, that's what we were able to do with it.
And then how were the responsibilities divvied up? So he went to the auction, but did he do anything else? Did your dad manage this property, the rehab for it?
Yep, my dad managed the rehab as well. He went on the auction. In terms of the responsibilities, it was really, again, just for the most part, 50-50. I was doing the tracking and expenses. Every once in a while, I would ask him to, do some things. But really, I'm kind of a control freak a little bit. So I really did a good chunk of the work myself. But, they helped out significantly. And we used Google spreadsheets to really track everything. And when I couldn't put something into the document, he would go into the document and put in information as well.
And then, so what happened? You finished the rehab and you refinanced. Let's go through that. The exciting part.
So we rehabbed it. Like I said, me personally, when I do rehabs, I would like to say that I over rehabbed and under rehab. I just want to make sure that I'm giving a great quality product. I feel like in the Chicagoland market, you hear a lot about slumlords and just not getting great quality for the amount of money that tenants are paying rent. And so we go in there and we try not to leave no stone unturned. So we update the kitchens, the bathrooms, we refinish the hardwood floors, we repaint the whole house, we replace the mechanicals. We did all those things. And after that, we got to the refi. And I guess I should probably talk about renting it out too. When we put it on the market, this is how we knew that we had a great product. We literally probably had over 90 calls the first week.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And so people just was calling us religiously, just like, hey, is that 3-bedroom still available? I want it. Just take it off the market. I'm like, wait. That's not how this works. Just slow down. You still got to fill out an application. You got to see it in person, make sure that you really want it. And so, but we wound up finding a great Section 8 tenant, and she's been great there. And then we went to do the refinance, and the refinance came in. We thought it was going to appraise at $100,000. It came in at 97, which is not a big difference. And we were able to get out every single last dollar out of that.
Yeah, so that's a super successful BRRRR, right? That's exactly what you want to happen. And yeah, obviously you guys have done a great job with the rehab if you had that many people calling in the first week that you had it up. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that, right? Because you said that you built a really nice product, but you also kind of said that you're investing in maybe like the kind of rougher parts of Chicago. So I guess some people shy away from like low income areas, right? And I think it's because there's this stigma that low income means bad person. But it seems like it's been working well for you. So what was your thought process on investing in that market specifically, and why were you not afraid to invest there?
Yeah, so specifically when I look at these neighborhoods, I'm not necessarily investing in a $30,000 house. That ARV is going to be a maximum for any house in that area, going to be $40,000 or $50,000. If you buy a house, let's say not a townhouse, but an actual physical house on that block, that house on that block could be worth, $150,000 to $200,000. So it's not that much of a low income area. It's just more so I kind of chose the cheapest product that I could get, but in a decent neighborhood. So I would still say it's probably a B minus C plus type neighborhood, but it's still me just getting any type of box that I can get to put a tenant in. It's like, hey, if I can just get a box and decorate it and make it look nice, then we're great here. So, that's what's the mindset of like, all right, you're going to get a house quality, or you're going to get a really nice product quality in terms of granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. But you're not going to own it, and you're going to be able to say, hey, I live here. I enjoy where I live. I respect where I live. And Chicago's, again, just so block to block. So you can go one block and it could be a great neighborhood, and you can go to a next block and it could be not so great neighborhood. And so really just understanding like, no matter where you are in Chicago, you're always going to find people who want to live in those neighborhoods. So, it's never really as bad as it may sound or it may seem according to public perception.
Now, you also mentioned Section 8. And for the listeners that maybe aren't familiar with what Section 8 is, or why maybe it's a good strategy to use, can you walk us through what it is and why you chose to use it for this specific deal?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, again, I think Section 8 is just government housing assistance for people who economically they can't afford it. And there's a lot of stigma around Section 8 about, what type of tenant class you get. But I promise you, they could potentially be one of the best tenants that you'll ever get. You just have to screen them the same way that you would potentially screen a cash buyer. Just take money out of the equation. And when you do that, like I said, you can really get what a lot of people consider guaranteed money. And especially when COVID hit, I was more concerned about my cash tenants than I were my government assistant tenants, because they were the ones who were having problems with the cash tenants because they were getting their hours cut or some was getting laid off. And I'm like, okay, so what we're going to do here, but my Section 8 tenants, when their income went down, the government stepped in and said, hey, we're going to cover your portion of the rent that you need to pay. So now essentially they're carrying my portfolio when I'm worried about, hey, this person who had their hours cut or got laid off, if and when are they going to pay rent?
All right. So the big benefit of Section 8 is that the government is subsidizing a portion of that tenant's rent payment. So, say whatever your rent that you charge is $1,000, maybe the government's going to cover 80% of that. So the government is giving you a check every month for $800. So you then only need to, ask the tenant for $200.
Yeah, so I have a couple Section 8 tenants I've had over the years, and they don't want to lose their voucher. So they stay in their place and they pay their portion because it's usually very minimal. And if there's they're getting that huge amount. And at least in Buffalo, the waiting list to get Section 8 or any kind of housing support is like 3 to 5 years to wait to actually get a housing voucher here.
If I'm a landlord and I want to become a Section 8 landlord, is it like a difficult process? Are there a lot of hoops I have to jump through? Maybe Martin, if you want to talk about Chicago first, and Ashley, you can share your experience in New York.
So yeah, it's not a difficult process at all. You just have to be committed to doing the things and providing the product that Section 8 comes to expect. And they, on their website, they lay it out real thick of like, hey, this is what every potential piece of the property that you're going to have, what we expect it to look like. This is what the walls need to look like. This is what the toilets need to look like in terms of condition, working good condition, fair working order. This is what the floors, this is what the landscape, yada, yada, yada. So they make it very clear when you sign up. Again, it's not a lengthy process. You sign up. It's more so just a waiting game of waiting to be put into the system in Chicagoland area, because that once they're trying to push you into the system, you could be a 60-day wait, but once you're in the system, you're good. So it's not a long or lengthy process at all. It's not hard. Again, you just have to be committed to being a good person or being a good landlord.
Yeah, Ashley, I know things are always complicated in New York. So is it the same process or is it?
Yeah, it's and like you have to follow their guidelines as to how they want the apartment to be. Like it has to be habitable, but really their expectations aren't that high. So it's not like you need to go in and put granite or put a ton of money into your property. But if you are not meeting their inspection requirements, then you probably need to do these improvements to your property anyways, because they're so standard. It's so basic and you don't want to be a slumlord.
Yes.
So, and they come and they inspect the property yearly too. I have worked with a different county than Erie County that Buffalo is in. And that county will actually sometimes do like 3-month inspections for one of the programs they have. And so it's like they make sure that the resident is taking care of the property too. They're not just looking at that the landlord is, keeping up on repairs and stuff like that. But they'll do listings for you too. So if you want, once you become approved, you can, anytime you get a vacancy, in Buffalo, you just fill out a form and you email it to a guy that works at the housing authority and he'll upload it into their database. And that way all of the caseworkers see it, get access to it, and they bring you somebody that's already pre-approved for their voucher and they know how much they can afford.
Yeah, and I do want to make sure I say 2 things about Section 8 as well. Like I said, if it ever gets to a point where, let's say, they had a part-time job and they can't afford to pay their portion, like when COVID hit, Section 8 stepped in and said, all right, we're going to cover 100% of your rent now. So that I've had that happen where one tenant, she lost her job during COVID and they said, all right, we're now covering 100% immediately. So it's about also making sure that they know that they have that benefit as well. If their income goes down, that they have the benefit of covering it. And as well, I think as Tony mentioned too, as well is those Section 8 tenants as well, they can lose that voucher if they don't protect it. So it's about making sure that they are doing the things that they need to do and being the appropriate good tenant as well. We actually had a situation as a police officer. It was a Section 8 tenant who was driving us crazy at work, and we found out that she was on Section 8, and all we did was make one phone call about her issue that she was having, how we were repeatedly showing up there as the police, and they gave her official warning, and it just instantly ceased. She became a model tenant. We never had the police, never showed up to her house again, so it was great.
It's almost like having a mom or dad to supervise a resident. I was just telling Tony the story how the one time a mom co-signed for her daughter who's moving out of the house for the first time, and the daughter stopped paying rent. And so I contacted the mom who had co-signed and I said, hey, I will give you cash for keys if you get your daughter out of the property and have her leave. And I actually wrote the mom the check instead of the daughter who was the actual tenant.
Love that story.
Nice.
So Martin, one thing I'm really interested in, and I'm sorry everybody, but I like to use this show for my own benefit, but I want to learn more about auctions. So you purchased this property at auction. Can you kind of give us like a step-by-step breakdown as to how you even find an auction in your area and what that whole process looks like?
Yeah, so we were using a couple of different auction sites. Auction.com is the first one that jumps out to me immediately, and they happen to advertise on the MLS as well too. So as we're scanning Zillow, the MLS, whatever listings that we have popping up for us, we'll see these properties and it will say in the description, go to auction.com, bid on this property, yada, yada, yada. So that's immediately what we did. We will go to auction.com, create a profile, and it will tell you about, the applicable fees that go with, trying to purchase this property if you're the winning bid. And so I've actually purchased a couple of properties off the auction. That first one, we were the winning bid at 29.5, so it was pretty simple there, and they make you sign all types of disclosures, and they give you a warranty deed. I know that's a big one too. It's like, hey, am I going to have to worry about any type of hidden liens that pop back up? No, we didn't have to worry about that because they gave us a warranty deed at the end of it, so that was great.
And is that something that they only do for some properties?
Right. In my experience, it's been all of my properties in which they gave us a warranty deed. Now, each auction could be different. You know, there always could be some hidden liens that pop up. I don't want to say it's for all properties across the board. For every property that we've purchased across the board, they've always given us a warranty deed, and all the liens that, if there were any outside of the mortgage, were wiped out.
And you said that for this property, you got to walk through it before. What about the other ones? Did you buy any sight unseen?
No, I didn't buy any sight unseen. All the properties that I bought off auction, they gave us access to, which was great.
And do you use a realtor for that? I've seen the auction.com website and played around on it, and I see that they have like realtors can sign in for an access code.
Yes. Actually, I went and got my real estate license after I bought my first townhouse. So I was like, I just kind of just want to be able to go when I want to go. I don't want to have to wait on a realtor. Again, that's my control issue. Is I'm like, hey, I don't want to wait on a realtor. I just want to go see the property when I want to go see it. I want to be able to negotiate directly with the seller, which I was able to negotiate some what I think is great deals at times and get the seller down. So again, that's just me being a control freak.
Okay, so then for the auction, you put a deposit down, correct? Once you win that bid, you have, how long is it before you have to, is it a credit card payment? You have to wire them cash? How does that work? And then how long is it usually until you actually have to provide the cash funds?
So we wired the money in. It's usually you put the deposit down, whatever the required deposit amount. Sometimes it's 10%, sometimes it's more or less, depending on what that particular auctioneer says that you have to do. And from there, they start working on the paperwork on the back end. And so they'll tell you, hey, we're ready for you to close on this property. How much more time do you need? And so that's exactly what happened. So the first one was like, hey, we're ready when you are. And we closed right away. And then it was another one in which I was like, you know what? I'm actually kind of refinancing on one property. So let me close extra 3 weeks later. And they was like, okay, yeah, that's not a problem. I was like, wonderful. All right, good. So
I didn't know that they gave you that much flexibility at auction. Like I thought it was like a tighter timeline. So that's like a really good tip for people that might want to buy for auction, that there's that flexibility there.
Yeah, all you got to do is ask, because sometimes they were like, all right, we're ready. And I was like, I'm not ready. You mind if I get an extra 30 days? It was like, oh, they'll give you, whatever time frame that you guys negotiate on, as long as it's not too strenuous or too egregious, they'll give it to you.
Any other advice you want to give to rookies who maybe want to try the auction route, especially buying through an online website?
Yeah, like I said, I think being able to go and see those properties was really a game changer. Like I said, I was able to use cash or from the HELOC. The HELOCs has been great. It's just like cash. You literally just go to the bank and say, give me X amount of funds, and we were able to wire it in. So, I would definitely say if you can get access to those properties, that's a game changer, because you can actually physically walk the property, know what you're getting yourself into, versus having to buy sight unseen, especially for a rookie when you're first trying to buy your first couple of deals.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, so many good things, man. Like the buying from the auction, you're using the BRRRR strategy. Like you're taking a lot of these kind of cool and unique strategies, and you're leveraging them to build a pretty big portfolio so far, man. So kudos again to you, brother. And
you got your real estate license. We can't forget that too. But real quick, before we move on to our mindset segment, I want to know, how are you managing these properties? Are you outsourcing that? You're doing that in-house in your Excel spreadsheets? Any kind of software for that? What does your property management look like?
So I'm using cozy.co. So I'll take all the phone calls. I could probably be a walking advertisement for some of your sponsors, because I've also used Tressa as well. Tressa's been great, especially when I've been trying to rent out some of these newer properties that I got, like literally one of these properties for the a newer 3-bedroom townhouse that I got. Again, we rehabbed it, and in the first 2 days, we had 76 calls, and I'm like, oh my goodness! If I didn't have Tressa, my phone would have just been blowing up crazy. And so I'm able to see all the analytics and the data via Tressa how many people are calling, and I just set up automated messages to say, thank you for your interest in this property. If you would like to schedule a viewing, this is how you can do it. At this time, we're only doing virtual showings. Or if you're looking for the requirements, because you have a lot of people who don't want to read what's in the listing, even though I put in the listing what the requirements are, and I'll say, the requirements are the listing as follows. And, and then again, Trust records everything. So I can go through and I can hear what people are dropping out at. So they'll listen to the recording, and after it says required 600 credit score, hang up. I'm like, okay, they didn't have 600 credit score. I guess I know what their problem was. Or it'll say, oh, criminal background check required, hang up. I'm like, okay, I guess I know what their issue was, So, I think those have been great in terms of helping me manage the properties. It's just, again, me on the back end. And because we rehab the property so well, I don't have a whole lot of maintenance calls, so I think that's been great as well too. So it's cozy, it's Tressa. I use Dot for electronic signatures. Those are all great things that I use to help me get the things done. Google Sheets, again, just managing what the tenant is paying, what expenses came up for that particular property, looking at what the budget is for CapEx and vacancy, so again, I can do that from anywhere. I can be out and about, and upload on my phone and just pull out my Google spreadsheet apps on my phone and just put it all in, which is great.
So with you doing the property management, when you have partners, are you paying yourself a percentage or a fee, or that is part of your partnership interest in the deal?
That is part of my partnership interest. That's one of my duties and responsibility.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your deal with us and all about auctions and your property management system. So let's move on to our mindset segment. So once you've started, investing into real estate, before you started, can you think back and did the expectations live up to reality? What you thought it was going to be, what you thought it was going to bring you? Is that happening, or has it vastly exceeded that, or been a huge disappointment?
I would say my mindset going in, again, you never really know what to expect. You can kind of project out what you hope that you can gain from it. But mostly I would say it's been a kind of a roller coaster of ups and downs. And so I'm kind of in between, where I'm like, hey, there's been some surprises and good and bad, so in terms of mindset of what my expectation was, I would say specifically, I didn't go in too high and I didn't go in too low. It just kind of went in with the worker's mindset of, all right, you know what, this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be something new that you've never done, but you have to be willing to embrace the challenge, embrace the surprises, and grind your way through it.
What resources did you use to kind of help get yourself ready to make that first actual investment? I know you said you had your family behind you. Was it just books? Was it just podcasts? Or was it something else that kind of helped you get mentally ready to take that leap?
Be completely honest with you, I would say life kind of prepares you, little small victories that you have in life, whether it's, getting that first job that you were so nervous about that it took 6 months to, finally employer call you back and say, hey, you're the candidate that we want over all these other candidates. Small wins like that really builds the mindset of, hey, you know what, I can do this. I can succeed in this world that we're living in. But specifically in terms of learning what I needed to learn, 1000%, I would say was the Bigger Pockets podcast. I literally, when I really realized that I didn't know what I didn't know, and that could hurt me big time, I realized that I needed to go through and listen to every podcast that I could possibly listen to, specifically starting with the Bigger Pockets podcast. So they were on episode, I want to say 248 at the time. And I went back to episode 1 and I listened from episode 1 to episode 75 before I was really confident that, all right, you know what, I can repeat these terms and phrases about real estate investing backwards and forth. I can have an intelligent conversation with someone. Now I'm ready to do this.
I love that approach, right? Because that's something that I say all the time is that, you obviously want to educate yourself before you buy your first investment property, right? Like no one advocates kind of going into this recklessly. But if you get to the point where you, like you said, these terms like the back of your hand, every podcast episode you hear isn't really new information anymore. It's kind of a regurgitation of the systems and processes that or it's just a slight spin on it. Once you get to that point, then you're probably ready to do that first deal. right? Like if you can listen to a podcast and you know 80% of what's being said, then it's probably time for you to get that first deal done. And it sounds like you were self-aware enough to have that realization to say, I think I'm mentally ready. Now let's go out and take the actual action.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're
All
gonna
right, awesome.
take you to our next segment here. It is the rookie request line. So this is where anybody can call in, leave us a voicemail at 1-888-5-ROOKIE, and just let us know who you are, where you're from, and what question you have, and we may play it on the show for a guest to answer. So Martin, are you ready?
Yes.
Hey guys, this is Doug from Reno, Nevada. I just purchased my first place in December 2020, 2-bed townhouse that I'm house hacking. I'm not sure if it'll be a long-term hold for 20, 30 years, as I don't love HOAs and the townhouse concept. And when I move out, it's more of a base hit than a home run deal. So I'm trying to understand why and or when the stack philosophy might make more sense than just living in a house hack for 2 out of 5 years to avoid capital gains tax, especially if I sell near term 5-10 years instead of having the townhouse as a long-term buy and hold. Just trying to understand for the stack is the concept that you're treating each of those properties as long-term buy and holds, so you're not as worried about living in them for a couple of years. Appreciate your insight, and thanks for your time.
If you could rent it out, then go ahead and rent it out. If the association is not going to allow you to rent it out, then you kind of force your hand on what you're going to do. I mean, essentially, you're going to need some place to live. So if you're going to do the stack model in terms of, hey, I'm going to move to a duplex and then live in that one, then I think your answer is kind of clear that you kind of got to sell that property in order to keep growing and then use the next property as your true investment property. But in order, you're kind of already house hacking right now. So I think that it's a great idea to continue to house hack. And when you're ready to move on to your next investment property, whether you take equity out of that property and continue to live in that one, or you decide to just go ahead and completely rent that one out and no longer house hack.
So Martin, can you define what the stack philosophy is for those that haven't heard of it? What does that mean?
Yeah, so it's coined by the great Brandon Turner, where he talks about you start with one investment, let's say a 1 unit of property of some sort. It can be a house, it can be a condo, townhouse, and then from there you buy 2. It can be a duplex, it can be 2 individual properties, and from there you keep stacking to 4 to 8 to 16 and so on and so forth.
Got it. And is that kind of what you're using in your portfolio, you feel, where you've kind of scaled in that similar fashion?
No, me personally, I would say that my philosophy on what I've done with my portfolio is, again, I'm a big systems guy. So I actually read the book Traction, and Traction talks about, defining this 10-year plan. And I went through and said, all right, in 10 years, this is how many properties or how many doors that I want to do, and this is how much cash flow I want to make. And so for me, what I've done is I just said, all right, every year I'm going to buy 2 doors. And me personally, I'm kind of an overachiever. So I'm like, if I buy more than 2, that's great. So that's kind of what I've done is I just said, all right, every year I'm going to buy two properties, 2 doors and keep going and scaling from there. And so, that's been, my plan and my goal.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. Well, I love your advice there. Hopefully the listeners got some value out of hearing that as well. I want to take us to one of our final segments, which is the random question segment. This is where we get to know you a little bit more. And kind of pick your brain about the world of real estate investing. So I'll go first. I think my question is about your strategy. So you said that you've kind of focused in on townhomes. Is that the building type that you think you're going to stick with, or do you have plans to scale to, or not scale, but I guess change to some other type of building? And if you're sticking with townhomes, what is it about townhomes that you like so much?
Yeah, so for me, townhomes, I felt like they were undervalued in the neighborhood that I were buying in. Like I said, you can, on the same block that I bought my first townhouse, there was a condo that had sold for $200,000. And so I'm like, wait, you got a condo that sold for $200,000, but the maximum ARV of these townhouses are 75, 80, 100,000. And I'm like, to me, it's no difference. Once you you decorate it on the inside, they're both going to rent for the same dollar amount. If you paint it, if you put granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, hardwood floors, 2-bedroom condo versus a 2-bedroom townhouse. Some people even like a townhouse more than they like a condo because you don't have anyone living above or below you. So I was like, you know what, this is an undervalued asset. Let me take this asset, develop it. And so that's been my philosophy with the townhouses. Like, hey, let me find, the cheapest house on a very nice block and develop it and let it cash flow.
Now, I just want to point out, like, what you're doing is you said, I know the market that I want to invest in, but let me find the right strategy and niche for that market. And you found out that, like you said, townhomes are an undervalued asset that fit my strategy, that fit my niche. So let me go all in on that. So, we talk about this all the time about, you can't do certain things in certain markets, right? Like you can't, probably doesn't make a ton of sense to do traditional single family home long-term rentals in Southern California, but it makes sense to flip in Southern California. And it sounds like you found kind of what that sweet spot is in your market. So for the listeners, whatever market you're in, there's probably a strategy or niche that you can employ to make real estate investing make sense. You just have to take the time and be familiar enough with your market to know what that is. So, man, I just love that you shared that. I wanted to point that out for the listeners.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so Martin, you have 16 units. You have to at least have one funny or crazy story related to the property or to a tenant. Do you have one you can share with us?
Oh, I got a bunch. It's so much has happened that I kind of take it for granted. The things that happen, I kind of gloss over them. Like, yeah, that happened. We got through it, and here we are today. For example, the very first time that I became a realtor, I went and showed a property. I went and showed a multi-unit building, and I got my son with me, and we're walking through this property, and I'm not thinking nothing of it. I'm kind of just oblivious, and which I'm ashamed to say being a cop. But we walk into this first apartment, and I'm looking around, and next thing you know, a lady pops her head out the door, and I'm like, who are you? Who are y'all? I'm the realtor showing the property. Who are you? Oh, I didn't know that this property was vacant. Nobody told me that. 3 more of the ladies come out of this room, and they all scurry out of the property. And I walk into the room that they were in, and of course there's all type of drug paraphernalia and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? And I'm telling my son, this is why I'm always, when we walk into these properties that we show, and I'm always on you to make sure you stay on my hip, because you never know who's in these properties. So that's one crazy one. It was another one where I love my father to death. I love him to death, but sometimes he overlooks things. And so I'm telling him, I'm like, we have the situation where the lockbox or the mailbox is just not working. We're trying to get it open. We can't get it open. I'm telling them, like, all right, check all the keys, because when we bought this 6-unit property, it came with 50 keys in a Crown Royal bag. I'm like, okay.
I've dealt with that before.
Like, yeah. Exactly, right? It's like, all right, Crown Royal bag is never used for anything but Crown Royal, right? So I'm like, all right, just check all the keys. Make sure we do not have a key to this mailbox, because I'm calling the post office. The post office is having issues where they're short-staffed. They're not having anybody going out and delivering mail. And when they do deliver mail, it's an overtime assignment. And so we can't consistently get someone to come out and open up this mailbox so we can change out the lock. And so I had a buddy. The great thing about policing is you kind of meet people of all different backgrounds that become a police officer. And he was a locksmith. And so I'm in my office, and I'm like, hey, I need you to teach me how to do your locksmith skills. And he's like, oh, yeah, I got you. And so he's teaching me how to pick the lock and stuff like that. And we're playing around on my office desk. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I think I could do this. I think I could do this. So I'm popping the office desk open, and I'm like, all right, I got it. So the very next day, I go to the property, and I'm working on a mailbox, and I'm trying to get it open, and finally the tools break, and I'm like, oh no. And so I asked my father again. I was like, are you sure you checked all the keys and make sure? He was like, yeah, I checked them. I was like, well, let me see the keys. So he goes into the bag, pulls out the key labeled the apartment unit number, and opens up the mailbox. And I'm like, really? Are you kidding me? He's like, I swore to you, I checked the bag. I was like, you couldn't have checked it. It's labeled the unit number on it. How did you miss this? So, oh my goodness. So literally just stories like that, where literally my father's like, I promise you, I checked it. And then I go behind him and check it, and we find it. I'm like, oh my goodness.
But I think every real estate investor has crazy stories like that, right? Or they have some story where it shows that there's always going to be some kind of challenge. There's always going to be some kind of obstacle. Nothing's going to be as clean and cut and easy as you want it to be. But that's why you're successful as a real estate investor, because you persist past those things. you continue to do the things even when they get hard, and that's how you find financial success. So thank you for illustrating that for us and giving us a funny story about your dad in the making.
Oh yeah, no problem.
So Martin, where can people find out some more information about you or get in touch with you?
Well, I'm always on Bigger Pockets in the forums. I'm on the Facebook groups. I'm in the Bigger Pockets Money, Bigger Pockets Rookie. I'm in the original OG Show podcast, or I'm in the Facebook group as well. You can reach me there. I'm on Facebook. I prefer you actually reach out to me on Instagram. That page is specifically dedicated to my real estate journey. So I'm there in Martin REI, Martin Neal REI. What else? I try to do a little bit on LinkedIn. I'm trying to get into these other platforms, but really Instagram and Facebook is the social platforms for me as well. And again, the forums, I'm on there as well, trying to give advice. I'm a little shy at times because I'm like, oh, it's already got 46 comments. Should I really add 47 to, be that 47 person adding a comment? But, I try to give my input and my 2 cents as well.
Well, I think a lot of people will take value from your input, so definitely don't be shy to add a comment. So thank you so much, Martin, for joining us. Before we close out today, we want to give a shout out to this week's Rookie Rockstar. So this is Lily Kay, and she just closed on her 6th deal. It's actually a college house, and it has been for 17 years. So she said there's lots to clean, but she is going to BRRRR the property and is looking for inspiration on how to rehab it. So if you guys want to go to the show notes at biggerpockets.com/rookies71, we'll attach a link to the Facebook post, and you guys can give Lily some inspiration there on what she should do with the rehab. So yeah, again, thank you, Martin, for joining us today. We had a great time and took a lot of value away from your information and your story.
Oh, thank you so very much. Thank you again so very much for having me. I really do appreciate it, guys. Thank you so very much.
I'm Ashley at Wealth from Rentals, and he's Tony Robinson at Tony J. Robinson. Thank you, guys, and don't forget to listen to the Rookie Reply on Saturday.
Still you try so hard, cover up your games.